Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of the Techno-Crime Fighters Forum. We've got a real hot topic today, a couple of them actually. We have our normal panelists here, which I will introduce in a moment. I've got a special announcement here from subscribers to Pinecone Utopia channel on YouTube. We've gotten some word from some of our subscribers that their subscriptions are being deleted. So you might want to check and see if you're still subscribed to Pinecone Utopia channel, because somehow, I don't want to blame anybody, somehow they're getting deleted. So you have to kind of stay on top of that and monitor it if you want to be informed when we issue new videos, and be invited every Thursday morning to Techno-Crime Fighters Forum. Okay, today we've got our normal panelists here, our investigation team. We've got Dr. Millicent Black, who's been in the program for 20-some years, being bombarded by voice-to-skull technology, radio weapons, microchipped. Then we have Karen Melton Stewart, an NSA whistleblower, who is also being constantly hit by energy weapons. And she's going to talk today about her interactions with the militia in Maryland. And then we have Dr. Catherine Horton, a particle physicist from CERN, who got on the list by being attentive in a court case that happened in the United Kingdom. And then, of course, as always, we have Ramola D. She's our celebrity. She's a famous writer and also a target. And her targeting is very interesting because it's taking place in a big city, and she's surrounded by perps. So welcome to the Techno-Crime Fighters Forum. Today, the general outline for topics are: we want to delve into Millicent Black's case in depth. Ramola just finished writing it. It's on her site, which is Everyday Concerned Citizen.
.net.
And we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about Karen's interaction with the Maryland militia. So we can get started. Karen, do you want to get the militia stuff out of the way?
Yeah, I think we'll do the minor stuff first.
Okay.
I had contacted Chris Dorsey, who I saw advertise himself as the head of the Maryland and Virginia militia, because I wanted to talk to him about the militia coming maybe to the aid of targeted individuals, since this includes infractions in law that are very serious. And he invited me to speak on his phone program, which he calls Militia Intelligence Report. And I sat and listened for a while, and then he introduced me. And my idea with that group was to tell them that, look, we're dealing with weapons of war that are being utilized against citizenry. This is highly unconstitutional, highly illegal. And I would suggest that, well, he asked me, he said, what is the quickest way or most expeditious way to get this into the public knowledge that this exists? I said, frankly, I could use maybe contact with five people in the militia. I can tell you who in the neighborhood has one of these devices. Maybe five guys could go to the door and say, look, we're from the militia. We understand that you have a directed energy weapon, and we know for a fact that under 18 U.S. Code and various sections that these are deemed weapons of mass destruction. They are not legal for an individual, a civilian, to have, and they are also not legal for anyone to use on non-combatant civilians. So we would like you to turn the device over now. Now you can turn it over to us, or we can sit here and wait for the FBI or some such agency to come out and take it from you. And he seemed to be very receptive. The people didn't say much, and that was my honest opinion as to how to quickly do this instead of laboriously going through courts and having how many people die in the meantime. And I said, this is the quickest way to say, look, here is one. and we can demonstrate it for you. This is true, it's factual, somebody's got to do something about it. And then later, like a day or two later, I get an email from him that was accusing us of having Russian contacts and wanting them to do something illegal, to get arrested, so that I must be indeed an agent from the government trying to set them up. Well, I had a few things to say about that.
Again.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Karen sent me the email. Please, Karen, quote them directly, please, because the line was fantastic. It's actually libel. If they mean us, it's libel. So I'm.
Well, I'll read the whole email if you want.
Yeah.
And I did have a rather acerbic reaction to it. It says, "Greetings, Karen Stewart. Members of the militia, including me, were perplexed and troubled by your advocacy of the militia confronting individuals searching property, seeking alleged," I never told them to search property, "seeking alleged direct energy weapons on the militia intelligence report on 5/19/17. I made it clear that any legitimate militia member would never advocate or behave in such an absurd, dangerous manner. We operate exclusively according to the law of the land, the Constitution for the United States. In addition, we wish to inquire why you propose informing the FBI about the crimes, wars, terrorism on the American public that you specifically attribute to FBI-run fusion centers." And that I answered in my reply. "Overt Putin Russian government propaganda and the verification of informants known to me personally who are associates of yours are clear signs of counterintelligence operations. Militia members have publicly stated you are actively operating as agent, as you always have. We wish to conduct our business in a lawful, straightforward, and above all, honorable manner. Therefore, I put the following question directly to you, Karen Stewart. Are you still working on behalf of the U.S. government, NSA, or DHS, or FBI et al.? If you are not currently actively engaged in espionage, why is it that you demonstrate every attribute of an agent provocateur? Agent provocateur, one, like I wouldn't know this, okay? One employed to associate with suspected persons and by pretending sympathy with their aims to incite them to some incriminating action, a person employed to encourage people to break the law so that they can be arrested. It is essential these issues are publicly and lawfully addressed." I think this is public, Chris.
Yes, it's pretty public.
But
no, that's priceless.
It's okay. And then my response to him, unbelievably ridiculous. No, I was fired from NSA in late 2010, fought to get a partial retirement based on my 28 years of service, which I began to receive in March 2011. The OPM agreed, NSA had tried to cheat me out of my retirement, so they fought with me. The OPM official's name in Boyers, Pennsylvania, where their office is, was Clyde Bronson. Ever hear of citizen's arrest? What you advocate doing to seditious officials? Is that legal or illegal? I'm sorry, I thought I was speaking to men, perhaps of the caliber of the founding fathers, but no. My point is that the quickest way to prove that directed energy weapons are being used illegally is to confiscate one on the principles of citizen's arrest to show the world undeniable proof. Did I say to do so violently? No. I said a group could show up at a home or surround a car with one known to be powered by the engine and tell the perpetrator, we know you have an illegal directed energy weapon and we want you to turn it over to us to take to the proper authorities, or we will call them and demand they do it here and now, and in doing so perhaps show the media as well. Now, who are the proper authorities? By law, it still is the FBI. Who else would you suggest? Give me another idea. Give me a viable idea. If a public display was made of turning over such a device, it would put the FBI in the position of having to do its job. Perhaps under new Director Jeff Sessions, they would. The sections under 18 U.S. Code regarding weapons of mass destruction, domestic terrorism, and civilian penalties for participating in both or giving assistance in regard to both can be invoked. Perhaps the publicity could shame the proper people, you know, the ones you somehow propose to arrest, By whom? Militia? Citizens arrest? Into doing their jobs? Ever look at the law regarding forcing feds to do their jobs? I will send you a letter to the FBI, which I just wrote and just sent to them to shame them into doing their jobs. It cites specific laws. I have been hit with dues 24/7 since late November 2015. That is 19 months straight. Many in my position and worse are desperate to have it stop before we are dead, capital letters. Some of this is radiological, capital letters. Directed energy weapons poison all the people around a target as well, not just family, but neighbors and even the fools using the weapons to get blowback. For all I know, I could have cancer right this moment. I have sudden vision damage, sudden heart ventricular damage, sudden appearance of a growth in the brain. I am sure I am paid a lot to allow NSA to do this to me as an agent, right? Is that your logic? So pardon my tone, but I am in full overload dealing with an onslaught of absolute idiots recently. Feel free to unfriend me on all media. The women will continue this life or death fight as the men continue to whine and bloviate endlessly. Enjoy your beer and illusions of adequacy. Karen Stewart.
Oh my God.
That was a good end.
That was so one in the manly testicles, I would say, at the end. It's getting better with time.
So hopefully we can find actual men in militias that have brains. So
yeah, and that have
And
brains
in the country,
balls,
you
I
know?
would like to say.
We need to find the men. Where are the men? You know, I'm sure they're there somewhere. We need
one
them
is
to
in
come
Ecuador, but you know.
Yes.
Well, I think that I knew that they would beg out of it. I knew that nobody's going to stand up for us and that they would get out of it somehow. I was surprised that they called you a Russian agent.
Yes, and a spy into
Yeah,
espionage.
apparently.
Unbelievable.
That's right out of the,
Sorry.
go ahead, Kathy.
I think this just shows this guy. I mean, I first, when I read his email, I thought, yep, I'm going to save his email as an example for my future, YouTube videos of what exactly I mean by weaponized moron. Because that's precisely what.
That's exactly right.
He doesn't even know who is on what side, even officially. Like, you accuse an ex-NSA intelligence analyst to be an infiltrator in the US. I mean, this is a US intelligence agency. Is he aware? I mean, the NSA is not the KGB.
That's right.
And I'm sorry, but if I were an infiltrator, would I say, hello, I'm from NSA?
Right.
But it's that tone of outrage that he adopted that makes me wonder who on earth he really is. Is this guy really standing for the militia, or is he an infiltrator?
Well,
he is in a top position, isn't he?
If you listen,
that's what they do. That's their MO.
He's a puppet on a string. He's got a hand up him.
Yeah.
He's a sock puppet for somebody. Because when I spoke to him on the phone and before, he was perfectly nice. And then 24 hours after I spoke on the phone to the militia, suddenly his attitude and his thinking changed, as if he had been told by his handler, oh no, this is not a cupcake, this is rat poison,
Right.
So,
yeah.
Go ahead, Karen.
No, and he just automatically adopted it. So he's not particularly bright. And when I spoke to him, I said, okay, this probably doesn't have a lot of promise because he's not real bright. And then his email to me just proved it.
Yeah.
But you know what? Actually, we should follow this up. I mean, I don't know. I'm so itching to teach this guy a lesson. But he put in writing that, because he said something like, oh, your associates are something like Russian infiltrators, and they are
known Russian infiltrators.
Who are your associates, Karen? I mean, is he possibly referring to us?
No,
well, he didn't say, conveniently.
But what he did say conveniently is that these people are known to him personally. So maybe we should report him to the FBI, because some Russian infiltrators are known to him personally, and maybe the FBI should know.
This is true, because it's against the law to know about felonies that are going on and not report them.
Exactly. So why don't we just contact the FBI and, let them open a file on this guy? I mean, he is interesting, let's face it.
And this whole strategy of bringing Russia into the mix. Why Russia? I mean, is everybody going after Russia?
It's a DNC.
You know what, Ramola, I want to tell you something really amusing on the Russian topic, because there was the case of, I'm not sure if you heard, but when they, launched the Iraq war, they had to spin this story of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which is totally made up, right? Yeah. And there was it's called like Joint whatever of Staff something in the UK, which had, I think, Sir John Scarleton and Sir Richard Dearlove, and they concocted this like dossier thing, which turned out to be a total lie, right? And that's how they roped the UK into the war. But one of the things that happened after that is that one of the top biological weapons experts, Dr. David Kelly, died. And I choose my words carefully because he died in a way that's actually absolutely impossible, right? And it was claimed to be suicide. Now, the people who raised the alarm was a group of doctors, and they said, this is ridiculous. There's no way for a person to commit suicide like that. Even if they did that way, there wasn't enough blood, and it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, in other words, open brackets, this was an MI5, stage spectacle again. And there was lots of helicopters landing and taking off, and it was just nonsense from start to end. But anyway, what happened is that these doctors started a genuine campaign and saying, we want a proper inquest. Because if people can be just bumped off like that, when we don't live in a safe country, we want a proper inquest. And of course, the UK didn't grant it, and then they wanted to take it to the EU level. And the lead doctor who was campaigning for an inquest into a proper inquest into the death of Dr. David Kelly was Dr. Stephen Frost, right? Now, what happened to Dr. Stephen Frost was, as he was about to take it to the EU, something that to me personally looks strikingly like an MI5 takedown operation, hammered down on him. And what happened is that he was sacked from his job as an army doctor on totally made up charges. They accused him of having done something, on a job which he didn't start until 2 weeks later, and it just turned into a massive, stupid thing. But so I attended his court case in last October in Manchester, which is when I was attacked by directed energy weapons, as an aside. But what was really interesting is that colonels in the UK army were trying to smear him as a Russian sympathizer by saying that his Facebook profile had an image of some scene in Russia. Maybe it was, the whatever in
St. Basil.
The Red Square.
Yeah, St. Basil.
Exactly, the really iconic thing. And the thing about Dr. Stephen Frost is that he's an incredibly cultured man. He's really interested in classical music and opera and the entire Russian, cult literature and music. That's why he had it on. And they tried to smear him as a Russian sympathizer because of a photograph on his Facebook profile. And you read these, the emails in the court case between these colonels saying, oh yeah, it's very, very suspicious. His Facebook profile. I'm like, is this really the standard of these military leaders? Is that how they found Anna Chapman, in the US? It was like, people are like, haha, look at her Facebook profile. It has an image of Red Square, and there are angry phone calls from the head of the FBI to the head of the NSA. It's like, this is your job to pick up these spies. It was her Facebook profile. It's digital. It's your job. I mean, how stupid can these people be?
It's a total like setting up of a bogeyman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it's like the dumbest possible way. I mean, it's just breathtaking, Anyway.
It's transparently stupid, and that's what astonishes me so incredibly about them, calling Karen as well a Russian spy. I mean, I studied Russian. Do they want to call me a Russian spy as well? Once upon a time, I've mostly forgotten it. I really loved the
Ramola, it's you. You're the one. Are you a personal acquaintance of this militiaman?
I'm the sleeping Russian spy, no doubt. Yeah.
Well, I think it may be whoever saw Dr. Zhivago probably is on their list.
Right.
Or read
War and Peace.
They've examined Ramola's transcript.
Well, I think we should take this thing much further because, first of all, it's exposing frauds. And second of all, it's really good for laughs. I think what we should do is there's militias and oath keepers all over the U.S. We're glad you're
Can't
the
read
Russian.
that.
The Russians pooped in the hallway. That's great.
It's two dogs, and the meme is, "We're glad you're home. The Russians pooped in the hallway."
Oh, that's hysterical.
Perfect. But here's what I'd like to encourage. Since there are these, this is the Maryland, Virginia militia, right?
That's what he claims.
Okay, well, there's militias which are set in place to protect American citizens from the government encroachments. And of course, they're encroaching on the Fourth Amendment, which protects us from illegal search and seizures, and of course, being hit by energy weapons, I think would agree with that. But they're marching around. Now, I can understand not wanting to go up against the deep state. Believe me, it's a scary thing. They control all the governments, they control all the media, and it's scary to have enough balls to get up and actually do something. And I don't expect any of these militias or oath keepers to do anything. I expect them all to beg out exactly like Karen's did. And so here's what I'd like to encourage all the people who listen to this video and the people that are in the chat today. Find out where your oath keeper or your local militia is and write them a nice letter telling them that you're being hit by energy weapons or there are people around you that are being hit by energy weapons and that you would like them to intervene on your behalf, on behalf of the Constitution, and do something, stand up. And then after you write, send, and you get the response, send it to us. We'll put it together in a video with some funny background music, and we'll read it up. Honestly, if you're a member of one of these groups and you attend a meeting, you have to realize that it's a fraud, unless you do something about this. You have to realize that it's not just a fraud, but you're paying dues to a fraud. And if we can find one of these things that isn't a fraud and is actually going to do something, I'll be the first one to stand up and applaud it. I'll make a video about it. We'll praise them all over the place. But I would bet you that we're going to get, no matter how many articles you guys send out, all of you people that are listening to this, we'll get that many refusals back. I'd be very, very surprised if they do anything, because they're there to beat their chests and say they're going to do something. But when push comes to shove, oh, by the way, I heard this morning that Theresa May wants a crackdown because of the Manchester bombing in England, and the police are refusing to do it. The police are pushing back. Yeah,
say it again, because for me it broke. The audio broke up because you said something really relevant here for Europe. So you know the European end of the connection broke up. What did Theresa May say?
Theresa May, of course, wants to impose martial law. They're waiting for something so they can impose martial law in this. What's her name? Adrienne Grand concert where they had these jihadis who actually were known to the UK government the whole time. They were following them. The parents of the jihadis even warned the government, this guy is dangerous, our son is dangerous. But they didn't do anything, it blows up. So there's the reason for martial law. So Theresa May wants to initiate martial law and have them crack down troops in the streets or police in the streets, and the police are saying, yeah, maybe we don't want to do that. So we'll have to see how that turns out, but it sounds like it's huge.
That's fantastic, actually. You know what? The one thing is because, sorry, in all the false flags, I've lost track.
Me too. All of us, really. How many, all the time.
Absolutely. So, you know, the last false flag I heard about was this like really iconic one. We have to get Big Ben in. So that was the one right next to Parliament, you know. The one thing is, were you referring to a new false flag in a concert hall or something? Or did I miss?
Yeah, there was. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes.
Karen, you want to tell her about it?
Oh, no, just one just happened in
Manchester.
Yes, Manchester.
Oh, when was
There was
that?
an
Sorry, I was so busy.
At a concert.
last week.
God, I have to look it up. I mean,
yeah.
You know,
I post on a blog, so I'm aware of all this stuff. And,
yeah.
Perhaps if they quit issuing the jihad visas,
Oh,
you know, this might help.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you're here for jihad? Just step this way.
It's like, you know what? I mean, if you ever travel from continental Europe into London, the first thing you notice is, I mean, everywhere they've got these iconic blue UK border PLC signs, right? No PLC, just says UK border. Like, that's uniform. And what's also uniform is the massive queue you'll be standing in. And if your passport is chipped, right, so it can be remote, you know, followed everywhere, you can go through the fast queue and then have your face scanned, you know, at these automatic. Maybe they should have a third line, the extra fast line of, you know, false flag jihad now, you know, express line into London.
Just carry a flag and you
exactly, you know.
ISIS or Al Qaeda.
I so lost track. I remember, Karen, the other day we were talking about some false flag, and I said to you, oh yes, it happened next to the MI6 building. I mean, back then the London thing hadn't happened because the thing under Big Ben is now walking distance from MI6, right? So the kiddies from MI5 and MI6 didn't have that far to go. But then I figured out why I thought the previous false flag I was referring to, I assumed it was next to the MI6 building because, and that was I think it was, what was his name? Lee Rigby, when they supposedly decapitated the soldier. And it's like, oh my God. I mean, well, you know, just watch the video footage and spot the, you know, bullshit. But I was thinking, why did I tell Karen it was next to the MI6 building? Because it wasn't. It was next to some barracks. And then I remembered, I read the article in, I think it was The Sun or something online. And then there it says, you know, as if that bit of information was important, you know, ostensibly. Oh yes, you know, the person who did this arrived in a Vauxhall Tigra. And that's the key, right? Because they put it into all these articles. A Vauxhall Tiger, if you reverse it, and Vauxhall Cross is where the MI6 building is. That's the station. So when I, you know, read through this, you know, the report of the false flag, I'm like, Vauxhall Tiger. Okay, yeah, he was carried there by a Vauxhall Tiger, was he? You know, I mean, come on. So anyway, but if you actually look at the footage of that false flag, it's quite impressive because there's, I think, one on one of the tabloids, an actual video footage where they, I think, take out, the police shoots one of the guys. And it's like, it's really well done because you have like the machine gun or the you know, the automatic guns going tick, tick, tick. And then one just goes, poof, and that's the echo is the sniper rifle. You can say, it's wow. They, you know, it's like Hollywood standard now, these false flags. It's amazing, you know, they have it all. But then when you look at the details, it's just so much bollocks. I mean, God, sorry. I get so angry. I'm particularly angry this week about, you know, UK, because I got a reply. But, you know, now that we're talking about letters, I finally got a reply from Greater Manchester Police because, as I said, when I visited that court case, I was massively assaulted with microwave weapons in my hotel room at night. Like half my head was burned, you know. Try going to a court case and, you know, think straight when your head was just cooked. So in the evening, I went to the police and I tried to make a police report. And they didn't allow me to talk to a police officer, send me back to my hotel. And then they sent a mental health ambulance 2.5 hours later. So I was like, okay. And this whole thing is online. And then I, you know, went back. And in December, I said, okay, that was very nice. Now, please send me my crime report. And they refused. They just didn't send it to me for months on end. So I asked a second time. I'm like, please, could you please send me my crime report? And also, I put in a bunch of questions like, who exactly authorized this? You know, who decided to call a mental health ambulance, given that I didn't even speak to a police officer? Who was that? You know, second, who sent the ambulance again? Which ambulance force was it? Because one guy looked a bit like an actor, frankly. You know, who exactly are the people who appear in my video? You know, who were the police officers at the scene? Because I would love to talk to them again. You know, all these questions. And also I put in a question like, could it be, or, you know, was there any phone call from, say, MI5 or some such external organization to your police force requesting this? So what do I get? I get back a letter saying, you know, from Greater Manchester saying, oh, you know, I think Inspector Miskell or Miskell or however to pronounce his surname. And he said, I think your answers are best dealt with in a phone call, you know, and please call me. These are my shifts. And then he lists his shifts for May and June. And, you know, a very nice letter. So I showed this letter to Melanie Richan, you know, another team member. And she says, oh, be careful with that, because I had exactly the same thing when I reported it to police. They call you in, or, you know, she was called into the police station, or they ask you for a phone call. And then the first question is, are you seeing somebody about your mental health? Thank you, Melanie. I was about to write back a really nice, you know, letter to this police officer saying, yeah, sure, I will call you. And I was like, fuck that. You know, have I lost my mind? You know, I'm like, no. So I wrote back a really stern letter saying, dear Inspector Miskell, you know, thank you for your letter, but I beg to differ about your assessment. I think my, you know, issues are best dealt with you issuing me my crime report and replying to my questions. Yours sincerely.
I love it.
Catherine,
all right, you did.
Catherine,
that was the right thing to do.
But you really do need to go there and get a copy of the call log or the report, and make sure that they did not put in your file that you are a mentally ill person. Because I had a lawyer actually wrote, and he was a oh gosh, what do you call him? He was the public lawyer, and I can't even think of the name for it. But he actually
a public prosecutor?
No,
district attorney, public prosecutor, public defender.
Aid.
Okay.
Attorney General?
No, it's aid. Oh gosh, legal aid. By the way, let me just weigh into my eyes. Y'all see that my left eye is.
Oh.
See, my brain
drooping.
is really under.
Yeah.
Really under attack.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
the lawyer from legal aid actually wrote the police department in Mount Pleasant and told them they had to redact that from my file. And that the reason is, when they put that in your file that you're mentally ill, then the police department, the police officers can come to you and approach you as a dangerous person. And you could get shot on a humble. Seriously. So you want to go get a copy of what they've got in your file and make sure they don't have in there that you're mentally ill, and then get a lawyer to write and make them redact it. They've got to take that out. That's what the lawyer said, is that's their opinion, and their opinion could cost you your life.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, that's very important information. Plus, these jerks, a lot of them are high school graduates, and they will basically say, in my opinion, or I don't think so, I think this or that psychologist or psychiatrist is wrong. Really, you with your high school education have assessed that. So yes,
but you
have to be careful.
Yes, you do have to be careful, and that's what I wanted to weigh in on as well, because as Melanie said, Catherine, you know, what they're trying to do is in some way get you, you know, they're kind of out to get you despite what you're doing. You know, you're writing a letter to them and saying you want it in writing, you want the crime report, you know, you want the document, you want the record, and they've got the gall to say you have to call us. And Melanie's kind of broken that code for you and told you what that's all about, right? They want you to call them so that they can completely link you to mental health issues. And you know, that ultimately, this is a huge, huge deal. And I wrote about it in Millicent's article last night, actually. And that's something that we were talking about last night. Remember, Millicent? This whole issue of the police and psychiatry. It's a huge issue. And we have got to break it open. We've got to break it down, and we've got to expose it, you know, from every front, because they are holding this against the populace. And they are building, and you know, we are talking about the same contingents. The guys who are running the false flags are the same ones who are building the fake laws, right? and putting the laws in the books saying, oh, we can step in and do community mental health interventions at any time. We can walk into your house if you call us and we decide that we are going to label you a mentally ill person. I mean, Millicent has had two occasions where they have literally walked into her house. Right, Millicent?
Wow.
And Millicent is incredibly savvy and has fought back. But, and you know, we should go into detail really on both those occasions in just a minute.
This is a great segue.
Great, then we should talk about it, because if you hear about her situation, Catherine, I think you'll understand exactly how the police are stepping in and using the scenario with psychiatry against people. So maybe, Millicent, you should just talk about that very first occasion in particular, and we can go into the second after that.
You know what, before Millicent, because I want this entire episode to be actually about Millicent's case, I just want to add briefly that I think this is really, really important, and I think people should learn with us. You know, we're stepping through the system and we're uncovering it, and people should watch what we're doing and imitate. You know, it doesn't mean you can't go to the police. When I went to the court, the judges said, oh, have you talked to the police? You know, and I said, well, no, because they're totally incompetent. I mean, if I don't understand this technology, but some guy with a high school degree is not gonna. So, you know, the judge was fine with that, but you do need to at least somehow get a toehold to prove that the police is incompetent. You know, but I think it doesn't mean that we can't go to the police, but it means that if you go to the police, you have to be prepared that you're not actually going to police officers, you're going to criminals, right? And you're there to get them. So, Inspector Miskell, I'm out to get you, you know, watching you, watching me.
Catherine, you cannot do that. Listen, I'm a mental health professional. Paul, you got to help me here. She can't make threats. Seriously, you can't do that, darling.
But you know what, what we will have, and I think these people are not prepared for that because they still don't understand the internet and network mathematics, because what we're actually doing here is we are compiling case files on them. But unlike the FBI case files, ours will be public. So, for example, the two colonels who tried to smear Dr. Stephen Frost have been published by the Daily Mail in the UK. And anybody typing Dr. Stephen Frost and searching for the court case in October can find these people and track them down on LinkedIn and track them forever, right? Because these corrupt guys, they're going to migrate through the system. So any bullshit from Inspector Miskell, and we'll make sure that his name will be on the internet forever. And wherever he crops up as chief commissioner or whatever, wherever the hell these people are promoted, you know, the internet and the public will remind him that he screwed up so badly when it was a question of solving crimes against humanity, you know. And this is how we're going to get them. It's all about network mathematics. And actually, right now, we are already benefiting from this because within seconds, a teenager can pull information from the internet about these criminals that before, just 20 years ago, would have taken a serious FBI investigation. You know, that's the true power.
And I think there's also a huge amount of power in actually calling out these crimes. We're actually seeing crime and criminality within police departments. And, you know, right now in the US, I don't know the exact details because I didn't have much time the last few days to read these articles, but there's some move, maybe Karen can address this, there's some move afoot to, what is it called, the Blue Light Project or something like that, to protect our police.
I'll have to read about it. I haven't yet, so I can't speak to it.
Okay, there's some bill on the books, and someone was sending out a petition, and I just put that on Twitter, but I was thinking, oh, I have to go back and look at that in greater detail. But it was literally about, you know, in a sense, there's a tussle between civil rights on the one hand and police on the other. You know, it's like, do we roll back our civil rights in order to protect our police? I don't think so. You know, I think the police is supposed to fulfill a certain societal function, correct, of protecting the people. And if they're not protecting people, then they should be called out for it. But now it seems that there is a push to protect the police more and more. In other words, you know,
actually,
solidify the police state a bit more.
Yeah, that it occurs naturally. It's not surprising because it's a natural it's a natural system effect, because the people are in there, they've got cushy positions, they've got cushy pensions, and once you're inside, what you want to do is make your job easier. So it's a natural system effect that with time the police would rather not go after really serious criminals who can literally pop caps into their asses, because that's kind of uncomfortable. So what they would rather do is go after you, Ramola, when you take your daughter to school, because
they're doing it.
Yeah. And that's why they're taking, you've got these big, big, strong men, police officers getting into a freaking chopper to follow you, that you take your daughter to school and back. Well, what we have is one big fat financial liability up in the chopper who's not doing his job, because for every hour that chopper is up in the air following you, I mean, I'm really glad that they do follow you, Ramola, because you're one of the systemically most important people right now, along with the other members of my team. So I'm jolly glad that Massachusetts, choppers are used to protect you. However, it is a bit of a financial burden on the
they've got and the police cars, like I should tell you the last few days, because we've been talking, Millicent and I have been especially talking about the police issue and the police and psychiatric issue. And every time we have a conversation, immediately afterward, I have a police car waiting for me as I'm trying to leave my neighborhood to go pick up my daughter, from school in the afternoon. And police cars on the street this morning, like fire engines racing in front of me, racing on the right-hand side of me, police cars turning, with their sirens blaring right across. And, and this is plausible deniability, right? Of course, because I'm sure the police have important things to do and there's a fire somewhere. But if this happens every single day on every single outing, then you have to ask questions about it.
You know what? I mean, you told me about this before, but you know what my gut feeling is? That given that you sent this memo to Trump, he literally said, listen, if something happened to this girl, right, I'll look so bad. So you guys make sure the roads are clear in front of her, right? That's what you got, the police front and the ambulance behind you,
Right. I'm the sleeping dignitary, apparently. Right. I'm definitely getting a lot of attention, and it really kind of blows my mind as to why, because all I'm doing is exposing crime.
First Amendment.
I think it's important that we redefine or look at police in a whole different way. They're not there to protect you. They're there, all they do is enforce law. I always looked at them and the military as the government's organs of violence.
Yes.
Governments couldn't exist without these criminals inflicting their rules and their taxes and everything on you. They play the role of the organs of violence. They kill people on behalf of, they kill them or cage them on behalf of the government. And,
yes, and the deep state.
And the deep state.
Yeah.
We do have a comment in the chat here that it sounds like Millicent isn't getting her time on the air, and we've been kind of
that's very, very true, my goodness.
Millicent,
yes,
I'm sorry that we seem to run over you. We don't mean to.
No. Actually, we will, because Millicent, we'll get on to Millicent immediately, because her case is actually at the core of this. It's the biggest, most bombshell case. Just before my last sentence on the police issue is also that what you described, Paul, is the situation with the police. And actually, Millicent has tons of stories about this, which we need to analyze carefully. The thing with the police is that what you described is a police in deep capture. And that's it. This is what the police is like when a system is in deep capture. This isn't normal, because I've also experienced police which generally is there to help you. But when you're actually inside the police and you experience this, the way you can tell that you are in deep capture is you will get a lot of bullshit from above. And maybe next to you, because, also deep capture goes to your colleagues and sometimes under you, so it engulfs you, one thing I want to say is that I have met really a lot of police officers who are, not just dedicated, they are willing, and some of them have given their life. And they have to understand that what we're now doing is actually recapture. So we're putting pressure on them from below, from the people who they are actually serving, because the people should be at the top and they should be their servants, so that they can pass the pressure on to their superiors to crush the real criminals there, you know? So what I really want with Inspector Miskell is that he stops pissing me around and actually, you know, frees the way that I can go after the people who made the phone call. You know, who corrupted this guy? Is it in the protocol to have a section? If so, I want to find out who wrote that protocol, or did someone make a phone call? That's what we're after. You know, of course he can't give it now, but he will sooner or later through the court case, you know, because that's where we're moving. So anyway, now let's open the floor, because Millicent's case is a bombshell, the total bombshell.
It is, and I'm so sorry that it's taken me so long and that I just published the article, because really none of you have had a chance to read the article, right, at this point. But it's going to be online for a long time. And Millicent and I have been working on this article together, literally for, I think, 4 months, right, Millicent? And I think Millicent was beginning to lose faith in my ability to write the story. But we've pulled it off.
Well, you know, it has to be born in, sorry.
I knew you could do it. I was just having increased torture from the perpetrator, who was trying to make me stop working with you and telling me that he was controlling you, and just all kinds of interference from him as a result of it. You all have to know that I have received severely increased damage to my right leg because of his anger.
So sorry, Millicent. And that's one of the reasons why I was getting a little frantic. I thought we really have to get the story out there. We really have to finish it. You know, and because you had started to tell us that he's actually keeping tabs. Well, you know, everything's surveilled. My computer's surveilled. I even started to save my stuff on Google Docs at night, because I've lost drafts before. And just to save the text every night, I've been putting it on Google Docs. So yeah, everybody and their grandmother is reading that story as it's, you know, being written over the last 4 months. And so I guess, you know, it's understandable that this guy has also read my story, and he's aware of what's the amount of exposure and disclosure in the article is mind-boggling, because it comes directly from Millicent's affidavits, complained to various state and Senate representatives, her letters to various people, her letters to the to Physicians for Human Rights, letters to congressmen and women, right? So many sources I had to look at to pull together the information for this article. And you know, the one time that I did try to contact who I thought was Mount Pleasant Police, but who was actually Columbia Police, right? He did not get back to me. And that particular incident, I can say very briefly, I was calling him trying to find out what the significance is of a certain code that was recorded in Millicent's 911 logs. And I should say that Millicent, over the last, I don't know how many years precisely, Millicent, because you've been calling that 911 number for a long time to record sleep deprivation.
2011 was when I started.
2011. And since then, you've been pretty consistent, right? Calling that number just to record sleep deprivation and assaults in the middle of the night with our frequencies and transmissions and implant activations all through your body. And every time you called, it was recorded as nothing very extraordinary. And very often, on several occasions, it was recorded as the calls of an insane person. 1096, right, was the code over there. And so the codes that they use, you can actually go online, hooray for the internet, go online and find the Tennessee radio signals and codes. And you can look at this table and match the codes they've got on the logs and see, aha, so this is what that means. It means call back up, call another officer, traffic light out, or something like that, you know, whatever the codes are, and you can match the two. And they had a couple codes on there that I did not understand. One was 1041 for civil defense test, and I think one was 1096, request test count. So Millicent and I put our heads together and wondered what that was about, and we initially thought it might be civil defense siren test, which is apparently a code, or rather is apparently a thing, not a code. And it has to do with, these air raid sirens during World War II, because there were physical sirens in every city and county and town. But somehow this didn't quite sound like that, right, Millicent? It didn't. I mean, we're supposedly not in the middle of a war. I mean, you and I know we are in the middle of a war. This is asymmetric warfare, it's stealth warfare, it's radiation warfare, it's surveillance warfare.
You know what's really interesting, actually, because one of the things that's important to note is that the air raid test is automatically tied up with actual well, what's it called? It's not air traffic control. It's basically air surveillance, because the air sirens are to warn you of planes coming in. So it's intimately tied to air traffic control. And as we discussed earlier in the week when we were talking about, satellites and implants and how our implants connected to satellites, Ramola made the point that the earliest implants were when again, in the 1950s or 60s?
60s, I think 68 to 69, yeah.
Yeah, so in the 1960s, they already had implants, and these implants were agents, and they would have wanted to track the agents globally, right? Because these were, that was the entire point. And now the system that was in place back in the 1960s that had global coverage was air traffic control, this sort of stuff. So the steering and control of implants is intimately, in my view, intimately tied to air traffic control. To add anything to do with, flights or, and later on that was, I think, upgraded to satellite systems and so on as the system went up. So and again, the person who is torturing Millicent is associated with the Air Force again. So we have these links, and air raid sirens are again to warn of, enemy jets approaching, So this is all seems to be linked. So whatever is torturing Millicent and these implants seem to be piggybacking on that system, I would say. So maybe that's where to look for this information. But I mean, this is the amount of research you two have done is mind-boggling. And I just want people to understand that the article that Ramola has written and that, the actual forensic investigation that Millicent as a victim had to do herself is amazing. It's like the most mind-blowing thing you're going to read. I mean, this is the most prize-winning investigative journalism you'll find this decade. Be aware and read the article like that. And also be aware that the research that Millicent has done is just, I mean, in my view, better than, the entire FBI department would have done in this topic. It is.
Well, I think maybe we should also say that Millicent's case is so incredibly unique because she knows her torturer. I mean, and he is the one who is implementing it personally. I mean, with me, Bill Black Jr. put me on the list to get electronic harassment, but he's not doing it himself. He just ordered it. This person, and very few people have a personal torturer like Millicent does. He's basically taken his torturing of her and turned it into a contract that allows him to torture her personally, day in, day out, for money. So with that, we need to, I think we needed to explain the uniqueness of her case and then, take it from there.
And also, it's also a federal contract, isn't it?
It is. And this is exactly what we need to do. I think very briefly, we want to encapsulate what exactly is going on with Millicent, kind of just give a little bit of an introduction to her whole scenario and situation. And Millicent, I can try to quickly run through it. And if I'm getting too long, just stop me, anybody, and cut to the chase. But basically, I think this all started with Millicent having something of an involvement with a young man many years ago, way back in time, in the 80s, between 1981 and 1988, when this guy was just getting ready to join the Air Force, right? And she was just getting through a divorce. She was in the middle of getting through a divorce. And in fact, her friends later told her, you would never have gotten involved with this guy if you hadn't been in the middle of getting through a divorce. Because she'd heard things about him and she wasn't really certain that she should get involved with him, which turned out to be problematic later, of course. So then the brief encounters that she had with him before he left for the Air Force culminated somewhat when he came back from a 6-year stint, which appeared somewhat mysterious. There was no indication at that time as to what he was doing during that time. But later on, Millicent, with her brilliant sleuthing skills, did find out what he'd been doing at that time. He was out probably in Washington State at that time doing SEER training, right, Millicent?
Right.
Among other things. And SEER training is survival, evasion, resistance, escape training, which all airmen are put through. And SEER training is also torture and enhanced interrogation training, which is the kind that which is the training rather, that those two psychologists, Mitchell and Jensen, the guys who were paid $81 million by the CIA to go torture people at Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo, right? That's where they came from. They came from the Air Force, those two psychologists. They came from their expertise in establishing torture through the SEER system for airmen. And you know the connection there with the CIA. So then they go and work for the CIA. So this is what he'd been training in. So this guy is trained, and this is a very key aspect of this entire story with Millicent, the persecution of Millicent, is that the man who is torturing her is actually very well versed in torture techniques that are actually taught and by the US Air Force, and that people in the Air Force are put through. And the point of the SEER, of course, is that ostensibly to help airmen evade giving away secrets or evade, if they're captured in enemy territory. And if they are tortured in these many ways, and if they are interrogated in these many ways, with sleep deprivation, with sensory deprivation, with excessive fatigue, with extremes of hot and cold, with waterboarding,
sexual humiliation,
and so forth. I mean, how are they supposed to respond? So they're supposed to respond by standing up as, strong American soldiers and airmen and refusing to give away state secrets and so forth. Right, so that's the intention and the intent of the SEER torture training. So apparently they're all put through it. So, and you can actually go online and you can find various sites where a lot of guys who've gone through this training express their opinions about it. And there are a few articles written about it, and there's mixed opinions. Some of them say, oh, I'm so glad I went through it. It's taught me so much. And many of them say this is absolute BS. It's just total torture, and it should not be done by the Air Force. So you have both opinions out there.
Just sorry to interject, because I think this is already. I mean, every sentence of what you're saying is, I think, enough for a PhD thesis here. But I think I want people to understand that what you've just described. The two people who got, what was it again, 81 million to go out and torture people. Right, in Guantanamo, was it, or in Abu Ghraib? Sorry, it was
Abu Ghraib, I believe.
Abu Ghraib. Okay, sorry, but I missed that. So we know what happened at Abu Ghraib, right? Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that I don't care how many people were in Abu Ghraib, but the people who were in there, but what the hell could they have done against US national security when you've got a steamrolling army and, planes and warships and, trillions of dollars of equipment? Like a handful of guys. What is that? It's not national security what was done at Abu Ghraib or even at Guantanamo. What it is, and I want people to have this image in mind, it is a psychopath's playground. There is no national security function in this bullshit. It is a psychopath's playground. So the two guys who were given 81 million are totally mentally ill people. They are
psychologists. They are psychologists. And you see, that's the ultimate irony here. You've got psychologists. You've got trained psychologists. What is a psychologist? I mean, think about it. Who is a psychologist? What is a psychologist supposed to do?
Well, I'll tell you, the torture is never, ever for gleaning information from combatants or detainees. That's never the purpose. I just downloaded an article by a Jesuit who wrote an article 400 years ago saying, you don't get information. They'll tell you anything you want to know. All you have to do is torture them. And some of them tried, oh, I've told them a lot of stuff, but nothing's true. But it's for getting confessions to already existing narratives. That's what they've done in Guantanamo. They've done it all over. They did it for World War II. They said, "Oh yeah, we killed them in whatever they killed them." That's one thing it's good for. What they're using Guantanamo for is to see how much these people can take, and I think that's what they were doing in Abu Ghraib. Also, you have to realize that these are all controlled by Satanists who have when
they have a thing about torture, they have a thing about blood sacrifice and bloodletting.
They do.
Yeah.
When Bush set up Guantanamo, he insisted that the people that ran Guantanamo reported to Rumsfeld, who's also a Satanist, every day on how it's going. And then he, of course, reported to Bush. So it's a closed system designed to see what people can take and also get this negative fear energy circulating. So that's besides the torture that you guys are going through, which is for a whole different altogether. But I want everybody to get out of their mind that torture has anything to do with getting information. That's been disproven hundreds of years ago, and it's been disproven by Senate committees now. It doesn't happen. You don't get information that way. It's for other purposes.
That's very interesting, Paul. I've always wondered, why on earth is Guantanamo still being kept open? Why are they torturing people in there? Why are they detaining people in there? It doesn't make any sense in terms of, is it symbolic? Is it a metaphor? Is it a precedent? What are they doing? But, it doesn't make sense by normal.
You know what, I have got a theory about that, and it will tie in with Millicent's case and with our cases as well. And my suspicion, when you look at exactly the details, right? I mean, if you look at what we know about Abu Ghraib and Guantanamo, you will see certain features recurring that go to the heart of the matter. And they will be a reflection of the perpetrators. And what you will see in all these cases is the sexual violence. Do you remember the photographs with the guys naked on this box and so on, with a hood over his head, throwing water over naked people? The nakedness, this is absolutely no function in terms of national security. What this is, it is porn for the perpetrators, because the perpetrators are psychopaths, and for them it is literally sexual arousal. The combination of violence, torture, mutilation in a sexual setting is for them addictive. So what Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib actually were porn factories. They were porn factories. And I bet my guts that it was filmed and it was sent back and sold on as prime footage. I think this is what it is. And the reason why it ties in with all the torture of all the, the targeted people, the victims of the intelligence agencies, is because I know for a fact that everything I do in my home is filmed, because they echoed stuff back to me, right? And the actual, the nakedness and the sexual element is there throughout. It has no function in terms of surveillance or national security. So we are human trafficked. As Millicent pointed out, she was told, and then I want her to say it again in this episode, that there's a porn market for the mutilation and maiming of women in their 60s, right, Millicent?
Right. And Catherine, for myself, if you can imagine what it's like, every single day you take a bath or a shower, you have one specific familiar voice talking to you about how you bathe, what his wife does while she bathes. You forgot a place or you forgot a spot, and realize that you're being recorded and other men are having this as their sexual, as their breakfast for the morning. I have dealt with this every single day since 2008. Every single day. I don't ever go into the bathroom for my bath without having that person. And it's only one voice, and that's what's so ugly about it for me. It's that familiar person talking in such specific real-time communication. And some of those women that we're talking about don't even bathe or don't like to bathe, or they bathe in the dark so that they won't feel like they're being violated.
You know what? I can back up everything that you say, because when I visited Melanie Richan in Brussels, where I was attacked by Belgian intelligence that followed me around with their Hamintel network, they waited, and after the first evening when I was working with her, that I went back to the hotel, climbed into the shower when I was naked. That's when they shot me in the face through the window, right? Nakedness. Then when they had a habit of I think I've got chips in my arm, and they had this habit of vibrating my arm into paralysis so that I would, collapse on the floor from pain. They would do that daily when I climbed into my shower. And another thing where, again, we're tying in with all the other people who have been attacked, look carefully at the case of Bill Binney and Kirk Wiebe. When I heard an interview by Kirk Wiebe, he explained how several of the NSA whistleblowers who were working together had a raid on their home simultaneously. Now, Kirk Wiebe at the time was sitting at his computer, and he could see people come up his drive, and he rushed down to open the door before they, blow off his front door. But what he didn't know, the story that Bill had at the same time, was that he climbed into the shower and these goons dragged him out of the shower. Now, this in terms of forensic evidence is worth gold, because immediately when it's a simultaneous raid and one person is naked, look at the person who's naked. He was the technical leader of the NSA. He was the one who was naked, and they wanted to humiliate him by dragging him out of the shower naked. Right? Again, the sexual element. Again, it's there. And one of the things you can tell immediately is that the entire raid was entirely timed on the moment Bill Binney climbed into the shower. Because the most important thing was that he was the leader, and whoever, he pissed off with his intellect wanted to humiliate him. That's what it was about.
Let me confirm what you said. One of the things that Randy Webster said, there he goes. But now I want y'all to see my eyes. Can you tell that my brain is under attack?
Yes. It's okay by us.
One of the things that I was told in 2008 is that they like the element of surprise. And so 7 o'clock in the morning is their favorite time to come to a person's house. And 7 o'clock in the morning on August the 16th, I believe, 2011, was when a police officer came to my home, told me he had a warrant to take me to the hospital, and he had an ambulance with him. With that, it was the police sergeant, his lieutenant, and an officer. All three of them came in my home uninvited. The officer refused to let me see what he called a warrant to take me to the hospital. I said, well, which judge signed it? He said, well, he called one judge's name, but when I finally did see the document, it did not have that judge's name on it. It was another judge, and it had not been hand signed. It was just his name typed on the form. The person who signed that, what he called detaining a warrant, was the sergeant himself. So obviously I wasn't dressed. Obviously I wasn't dressed, and he was going to make me leave the house undressed. I just happened to have kept a blue jean dress that buttons up the front. I kept that where I could always put it around on me, because I never wanted to go to the door undressed. If I had not put that dress on, he would have made me leave the house in my gown, because he wouldn't let me put my shoes on. I had to wear house shoes, and they threatened to arrest me if I didn't go with them. Now I'm in my house, minding my own business. I might have called to make a complaint during the night, but this was at 7 o'clock in the morning, exactly the time that that person who I've talked to you all about before told me that that's when they like to surprise the victim. The other thing about that particular morning was that time and the second time that sergeant came to my house. His name was Jeffrey Taylor. He had made a statement to me, say a week or two prior, And when he came to my house with his warrant, the statement he had made to me was what was on the warrant. And he said, I said it. When I looked up.
And that had to do with the satellites, right? He actually said to you, they put satellites around the victims, around targets. And then later, oh, that's the second time. Yeah. So there's several remarks that he's made.
Right. The first time it was about microchips. Remember, and him saying,
yes, that's
that particular warrant that he had observed evidence that made him think that I had been mutilating myself, trying to get microchips out of my body. Now that's what he wrote on his little detainment form. I had shown him pictures 6 weeks earlier of bruises, scratches, marks that indicated I was being tortured remotely. And he uses that 6 weeks later to come to my house with the warrant, saying that he had observed this and he had concern and he wanted me to be examined at a hospital. But the point and the problem was they had not consulted a judge for an emergency detainment. He used what he said was some old rule on the books that allowed them to do that under an emergency circumstance. However, you don't wait 6 weeks if it's an emergency. But he and his lieutenant and the officer came into my home. I had called Dr. Oliver Williams, who is the director of the Institute Against Domestic Violence in the African American community, and told him that they were at my door. So while I'm talking to him, they came in. So he said, well, what does the warrant say? I said, he won't let me see it. So at that point, he handed it to me, and that's when I read what he said. And Dr. Williams' first question to me is, where are you? I said, I'm in my home. He said, you're where? I said, in my home. Because they were not supposed to be in my home. The warrant didn't give them anything, said nothing about a search. Nevertheless, Dr. Williams told me, he said, go with them, call your lawyer and call the domestic violence advocate, because I had been making reports and communicating with a domestic violence agency in this town. So I turned around and said to the man, well, I need to get my purse and my shoes. And he said, well, I'll get it for you. Walked into my bedroom without a search warrant, came out of my bedroom, searching through my purse. And he, on his way into my bedroom, he said, do you still have that gun? I said, well, we've never discussed the gun. So I knew immediately this was more set up so that they could claim that I maybe tried to do something if they wanted to shoot me or something.
The whole thing, I mean, sort of smacks of the wrongful action. First of all, whoever said that a police person could just open the door and walk into somebody's house without an invitation?
Actually, you know what? When I'm listening to this, the police officer who signed the warrant and who came to your home twice, that was, you said Jeffrey Taylor, is that right?
That's correct.
So Mr. Jeffrey Taylor has something coming for him now, because everything he did was not just illegal, it was criminal, right? Everything, as you pointed out, if somebody is really somebody's that, mentally, then you don't stress them out with these early morning raids. But what they did with you it was entirely targeted to humiliate you. And that's exactly what they did with me in Manchester. I didn't even talk to police officers. They were that concerned about my mental health. You don't send a woman off into the night, onto the motorway and say, bye, see you whenever, and then turn up, 2.5 hours later. No, with me, they were also waiting. They were hoping I would be, 20 minutes to midnight. I would be in my nightgown in bed in my hotel room. Fortunately, I was still working, but that's the entire point. It is humiliation, and more than that, sexual humiliation, because nakedness always features. So Mr. Jeffrey Taylor will track him down wherever he is in Tennessee and will make his career very difficult. Because I tell you another thing.
His career actually ended. In 2012, a year later, he got demoted from that incident, I think, to corporal. And for at least 11 months, he was a corporal instead of a sergeant. But then right after he got his status back, in 2012, he come to my house again. This time it's at 11 o'clock at night. And this time is to give me a citation for filing false reports. And the false report is what he said on his statement. He said, she says that she is being attacked by satellites. But he had already made the statement to me a week or two earlier that there are satellites all around you. I never one time mentioned being attacked, I don't think, by satellites. But that's what he wrote on the citation that he gave me. And he wanted me to sign it, and I said no. And he said, well, if you don't sign it, then I'm going to arrest you. So I did sign it, and I signed my name, and I also wrote on the warrant, under duress. It's important that we understand that when they make us sign things, that you write under duress, that means something to the court system. It means you're being forced to do something against your will. That citation was a felony, y'all. It could have got me thrown out of seminary. And it was designed to keep me from moving from the area, which is what I was about to do. I was about to move to Dayton to go to seminary. So I ended up having to stay in town for a year. Exactly. And obviously, it kept me close enough for them to do their training, as well as close enough to that person who was able to do a lot more things to me because I was in much closer proximity.
This is, you know what, this is an absolute goldmine, because you know what, in the olden days when you know, databases weren't quite as advanced, people would just, you know, take these reports and then, you know, discard all the names and then focus on the case maybe, and you know, your victim testimony. But we're now in the 21st century, and what I'm saying is Mr. Jeffrey Taylor, even if he's left, he left a digital trail, right? And that's what we're after. Because Mr. Jeffrey Taylor, from his behavior, tells me already that he will lead us to many more people who are involved. And that's what we're after. So we're going to track down Mr. Jeffrey Taylor before too long. And we'll look very carefully at everything that he did in that time and since then. Because you know what? My interactions with Memphis FBI were so irregular. And any sort of irregularity is an indication for capture. End of story. So there's capture in the FBI in Memphis. And looking at the past history of Memphis and looking at what's statistically most likely, I would say that there's some child trafficking washing through Memphis. And let's just have a look if Mr. Jeffrey Taylor isn't somehow involved in pedophilia, child trafficking, or other such things, because usually they are. There has to be some sort of mechanism by which Mr. Jeffrey Taylor is somehow incorporated into this architecture of crime, that he did that to you not once, but twice, right? He must have some sort of tentacles that he was again promoted and then recruited straight away to pull off this bullshit. So Mr. Jeffrey Taylor's digital data will lead us to a lot of people. And I would bet my innards that it will lead us also to some pedophile rings or drug running. And
in fact, part of this story, part of Millicent's story, does touch the whole issue of pedophilia and child sex trafficking. And, you know, actually to backtrack just a little bit, we need just to establish, went off to the Air Force and got all this training and then put his training to use, secured a contract with, we don't know who exactly, but it could be the DIA, it could be the Air Force, it could be the DCS, which is Defense Clandestine Services. It could be any one of the federal agencies like NGA, which is the National Geospatial Agency, or the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Office, or it could be, you know, NASA. I have no idea. It could be any one of these, because the use of satellites is involved, the use of tracking chips is involved, the use of V2K and radio transmissions is involved. And the use of nanobiosensors in the body is involved as well. And that, you know, it's a whole can of worms. There's like literally, Millicent is at the hub, and she's being used for a whole train, it appears, of covert clandestine research projects, which involve multiple federal agencies, defense agencies, and defense contractors, and universities. There are actually universities working, possibly undercover, or under covered agencies, under the protection of covered agencies, in covert ops, with covert ops black budgets. They are working, doing things like disease detection, disease monitoring, across vast spaces, literally, because there are frequencies in Millicent's body that have been found that are actually being projected across from places like Azerbaijan, force and military bases in Turkmenistan and Kyrgyzstan and Azerbaijan, and the same frequencies that are related to defense contractors like Mitri Systems, and universities like Princeton and Stanford and the White Rose Research Consortium, which is a whole bunch of universities. So all of these different entities appear to be involved. So when you look at that, this is not just one crime, it's like a multiplicity of crimes that are being covered and that are being sheathed. So you have this person who's actually pulled this off, who's got this grant, who's got this project, and he's doing it. He's being paid, literally, to torture and persecute Millicent night and day, 24/7. And he's been doing it since, right, Millicent, when the high-tech torture really started?
2003 is when the high-tech torture started, but it was 1996 that my cousin told me, they've told us we can blame anything on you. 1997 was when her sister said, the devil is playing with your mind. And when he's playing with you, he's going to destroy you. And when they open you up after you're dead, they'll find that all of your organs have been stressed. Stress is the operative word, because stress is Air Force Research Laboratory is constantly investigating to see how soldiers and airmen respond to the pressure that they find themselves under.
Of continuous stress, correct. Yes, right. Absolutely. And so, and you've got all of this going on, start in the 90s, and this is the actually, I'm glad you mentioned that, Millicent, because that brings in the whole issue of how the whole town appears to be involved and appears to be in the know. And this actually brings us back to that issue of the civil defense test. I mean, is that civil defense test code something to project the idea that a kind of system, a surveillance system, is being tested out? And this surveillance system involves implants. It involves radio frequency. It involves certain people being kept tabs on. In other words, it involves targeting of the kind that you and I know at this point in time. So and is everybody else being told that the country is being secured and is in lockdown because we have these terrorists on the loose and we need to protect ourselves from them through these means? I mean, what exactly is going on? I'm sort of speculating here. So because the whole town has been involved, they have been told stories. In fact, Millicent found out that the guy who's actually persecuting her, his sister, called a meeting with the chief of police in the town, and everybody, various other people, right, Millicent? Why did they get together and start talking about Millicent? Why is the chief of police involved? What transpired in that meeting? So Millicent has tried to find out what on earth transpired in that meeting. Did you want to talk about that, Millicent?
I learned about it just by the slip of the tongue of my sister, who said to me that this guy's sister had called them to a meeting at the chief of police's office. Now understand, this guy's sister is not a member of the police force. She does not work for City Hall. Why is she allowed to call my children, my mother, my sister, and my former pastor to a meeting? And I asked my sister, did she attend the meeting? She said yes. So why is she in the police department asking questions about me or my involvement or my complaint against her brother? Why did she never approach me about it? And she never has to this day. Now, I don't know how many years ago that was. I don't know if that was in 2011 or 12, because January 2012, I did file for a order of protection person, and it was from microwave and electronic devices. So I still am yet to learn the content of that meeting, But what my sister said to me in a text message, she said, essentially, Tommy Goetz said that you were nuts. Tommy Goetz, the chief of police. So he's talking to my family about my mental health status after, and possibly after a lawyer had written to his department and told him that they could not make such diagnoses because their training does not carry them in that direction. And let me say that former Chief Tommy Goetz was indeed a high school graduate. Not anywhere do I know of any college education. Now, Catherine, I did file a federal lawsuit after it took a year, almost right at a year, for that citation for filing false reports to be dismissed. And my record, listen, it went straight to my criminal record.
Yes, and actually, going back to that moment, we should also mention that you were taken off once again to the ER, and a doctor checked you out, right? A psychiatrist. You spoke to a psychiatrist, correct? And
now, are you talking about in 2011 or 2012?
Well, why don't you talk about the second situation, because when the filing false reports claim and when you were held back for 8 days.
Okay, the second, when Sergeant Taylor got his status back to sergeant again, he came, I told you, at 11 o'clock at night, and he says, I'm giving you a citation for filing false reports. And the false reports was that I was being attacked by satellites, except that was not a statement, again, that I had made. And you will find, if you will go and look at police misconduct, that it is not uncommon for the police department to accuse the victim of saying statements that they themselves have made. And that's what he was doing to me. For background information, though, Sergeant Jeffrey Taylor had told me at his first visit to my home, or maybe the second, that he had been in Marines intelligence and that he had helped the Marines do LSD experiments on the Vietnam veterans.
And that's MK Ultra.
Right, exactly. And he also told me that he knew about my history, and he said to me of the person that I was complaining about, does he have a circle of friends? Do they get together and compare data?
And the other thing he told you was about the microchips.
He did indeed. I had fallen down a hillside the year before. Actually, I was knocked down a hillside. I was hit on my ankle by a laser that made me fall down a steep hillside face first. My chin hit the ground, and so I actually could have become a paraplegic from that accident, from that fall. Gratefully, I did not. However, he said to me, did you have to go to the hospital when that happened? And December the year before, I was broadsided in a car accident, which was also, y'all understand where I'm headed, which was also a setup. So he said, if you had to go to the hospital when you had that car accident and go to surgery, he says they put chips in you when you go to surgery. So he said all of that during that particular night. Gratefully, I had another TI on the phone who lived in another state, and she heard the entire conversation. So she did document what she had heard.
So he admits to you that he knows all about this type of program, and then has the gall to fabricate accusations against you that you're mentally ill, because you imagine what he has already confirmed to you. That is just preposterously evil.
It's even better than that. It's even better than that, because sorry, I had so much to do. I didn't actually keep as detailed a tab on your case, Millicent, as I should have. So I forgot this detail that Jeffrey Taylor was actually an intelligence officer, Army intelligence. Was that right?
Marine.
He was
Marines. Marines, even better. Here it comes. Now the thing is that what we see in all countries is that we have, and I'm sorry about the word, I just can't bring myself to use pedophilia because it just sounds so nice. We have basically this huge infrastructure set up for kiddie fuckers in government. Now, this takes a lot of children and a sophisticated supply chain. And it begs the question of how the hell do these children disappear? How are they transported? How they come into the country? And we're talking large quantities, right? So a city like London needs a serious supply chain to actually provide the children for all the pedophilia. And when you have, human sacrifice, which happens apparently abundantly, these children die. So you need to refresh the supply non-stop. Now, the question number one is, how the hell can this go on without MI5 figuring it out in decades, right? Simple data analysis question, which immediately follows that MI5 is running it. And should anybody have any doubts about it, that you can go back and listen to all the accusations against heads of MI5 and MI6 in past, cases where they were, in on it, So there we go. So this means that when you have MI5 and MI6 running it, it follows that military bases are used to store the children. And military kit and military transport is used to transport the children. Now, Mr. Jeffrey Taylor already has a lot of shit on his boots through your case, but now through the link to intelligence, marine intelligence, it goes right back to the kiddie fuckers and the supply chain, right? And as they found, one of the mainstream media articles that mentioned, the discovery of chips inside people, it was actually a human trafficking victim where they found one of the chips, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that's what chips are used for. They chip the children and they chip the women and also some guys who they use for human trafficking to keep track of the goods in transport. Right. Because that's how these psychopaths think about people. They are objects. So, just like you heard about probably these very, very small chips that you can now spray on and put into any sort of product that you sell, not just iPhones, but also, any sort of even cans, cans of food and anything you want to chip, you can do that now. And you can have one of the technologies that was advertised is you chip all your products. So when you have a big Walmart, you just send an electromagnetic pulse, listen to the echo, and you can do an inventory every day really quickly by just, these chips in the products. That's how the technology was advertised. Now you can do the same thing by chipping children, right? And you send an electromagnetic pulse through the military base, and you know where the children are, and who is there and who isn't, right? So sadly, this is how these chips are actually used, because the children are higher value products than iPads and iPhones, So the chips will be put into them first, actually, because they're higher value goods. But through that, because the intelligence lots are, it seems, in charge of the supply chain, Mr. Jeffrey Taylor has just led us to another link where how we can get him. Because I bet you that this is exactly the kiddie fucking architecture, that connects him to the people who are in charge of the federal grounds that your abuser got, and now are taking care through this link via Mr. Jeffrey Taylor of harassing you and trying to keep you silent. But the system is connected, so we're looking for the connections.
Yes, and that's exactly what I found out working on Millicent's article. The very fact that the police are behaving in this fashion, and the very fact that the entire town has been brought in on it and has been turned against Millicent with all sorts of stories and lies circulated. And in fact, she found out that one of the stories that was being circulated was that she is stalking Mr. Wolf. I've called him Wolf, by the way, in my article, Barrett Wolf. So Mr. Wolf is supposedly, I stopped short of calling him Rascal Wolf or something equally ridiculous, I gave him a decent first name. He should be grateful. But Mr. Wolf, is the one who stalked her from 1988 when she turned him down, when she said, look, buzz off. I don't want to have a relationship with you. You're turning out to be an absolute schmuck. Goodbye, And he couldn't take that gracefully and disappear from her life. He decided, I'm going to get you. I'm going to spend my entire life. I'm going to become an obsessive rat in a rat hole. And I'm going to spend my entire life trying to figure out how to get you. And he did.
Malignant
that is
narcissist.
Exactly what he did. Exactly. Totally. Malignant narcissist.
Known as static wanker, but not in the official diagnostics.
And, throw in megalomaniac psychopath as well. And, frankly, the things that he has said to Millicent, both to her face and via V2K, will blow your mind. I have some of those choice quotes in the article, by the way. So do go and read the article. One of the things he's come to is he said things like, I want the whole town to bow to me. And yes, I know I'm delusional, but it's too late. I can't be stopped. Things like that.
I brought up with Captain Potts, I said, if you take this man in and have him psychologically evaluated, you'll find out that he's a psychopath. Is it not worth the effort? I mean, taking Millicent in for complaining about being victimized is okay, but taking the victimizer in to see if it's possibly true is not okay. That makes no sense whatsoever.
Which really brings up the question, who are they protecting, And it comes back to this whole thing of the town being involved, the town being told stories. And Millicent suddenly, here's a classic case of blaming the victim. Turning around and saying, Millicent is stalking Mr. Wolf.
It's important to say here that the Mount Pleasant Police Department was contacted by Dr. Cynthia Spanier, who is a clinical psychologist from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. After the first time they took me to the hospital, which, by the way, I was released in 2 hours. The doctor said he saw no reason for me to be there. But Dr. Spanier called them and said to them that she had talked to me that I am a victim of domestic violence, and that she was, calling them because it was her opinion that my life is in danger. Now, if you look at even my health from 2011 to now, and how much it's proven that what's happening to me is a result of traumatic assault, Dr. Spanier was telling the truth. And she spoke to Sergeant Jack Burgett, and Sergeant Burgett wrote what she said, except he left out, if she said it, other words about this person that Dr. Spanier said to me, and that he is a narcissistic abuser, a sociopath. That was her opinion. Now, whether she said that to Sergeant Burgett, I'm not sure. It's also important to understand that I did file a federal lawsuit against the Mount Pleasant Police Department, and it was for all my civil rights violations. I did that pro se because I did not have money for a lawyer, and it's hard to find a lawyer in this area or any other area. I think I understand that is going to be of the kind of integrity that will follow through. And even if he is integrous, the system will.
And standing up to the deep state, essentially, lawyers are afraid to stand up.
Yeah, we'll begin to mess with their lives and their families and their business. And so that's not something, I guess, that we can really complain about. However, I put all of those documents in the federal courthouse. I wanted to make sure they had everything that was going to mean anything to me or anybody else at some point in the future. All of the ways that they violated my civil rights, all the ways that the color of law was implemented when it was absolutely illegal. And I managed to stay in the court for a year before it got dismissed. And the federal court dismissed the federal charges, but they remanded the state charges as an option for me to take back to state court. When I went to state court, and I did file the complaint in state court for the state part of the state statutes that had been violated, the city went to bat and began to focus on a municipality charge. But I was able to show them that these crimes were committed to me by these men as individuals, not just a municipality. Also, it's important to say that, and my brain is being messed with right there.
Well, do you remember the judge as well? The judge for that case turned out to be an attorney that had actually defended Mr. Wolf earlier when you tried to bring an order of protection against him.
Right. In state court, they assigned the case to the person who is now a judge. And in 2012, when I filed for order of protection, he was this person's attorney. I believe that he was deliberately chosen because they knew of the association, and he would not recuse himself until I filed a motion for that. When he did finally recuse himself, he assigned the case to a friend, to a judge that had just entered the bar in this, entered the court system in Murray County. And that judge obviously was already told what the outcome was supposed to be. But after I filed the federal lawsuit, just before I filed the federal lawsuit, Tommy Ghost, who was the chief of police in Mount Pleasant, he quit. Mr. Westmoreland, who was the investigator for the Mount Pleasant Police Department, and he told me himself that he was also a Marine, he quit. And after I filed the federal suit, then Sergeant Jeffrey Taylor quit, as did now Sergeant Amy Dean. And Amy Dean was the domestic violence representative for the Mount Pleasant Police Department, who said without seeing me that it was her opinion that I was a danger to myself and others. And actually that's what made me go to a lawyer, and that's what made the lawyer write the police department. That statement had to come out of my file. That was her opinion, and she did not say in any way that she had any training that gave her permission or any kind of background by which she made that diagnosis.
It can't be called a diagnosis. It was the musings of an imbecile, really.
Well, she also left the force.
And it was a deliberate attempt, really, to stop you, to delay you from going on to Ohio to get started on your doctorate program. And by the way, I should point out to everybody, you know, Millicent is the most extraordinary person. She has gotten a master's degree pretty late in life, and she started on her doctorate when she was 60. These are not the signs of a delusional person. These are not the signs of a mad person. Millicent is like the most extraordinary researcher that any of us have ever met, really. She's the most amazing detective, really, because she really hones in on a subject and she figures things out. She goes after it, you know, every angle. And the other thing she really is that many people don't know, but that I hope that my article will introduce them to, is she's a brilliant writer. I quoted an entire section from Millicent's letter. I forget who it was to. Oh, yes, it was the Senate Judiciary Committee. Right, Millicent, all Inspector Leahy. Yeah, so that letter, we have to post online, Millicent, in PDF format in full. That is the most brilliant, the most astounding letter I have ever read, demanding that anybody in the Senate take action. And I can't believe that anybody could receive a letter like that and not immediately take action, not immediately pick up the phone, not immediately do something. Because the things that Millicent said in that are just beyond incredible, just absolutely fabulous, because she actually gets to the heart of the matter, and she says, pretty much like we did in our memo to Trump, by the way, she says, you know, this is slavery. This is enslavement. This is enslavement, you know. This is not what America stands for. And this, I thought we'd come past that. Where are our civil rights? Where are my human rights? She asked really pertinent questions. So,
you know, I would love to have a copy of that on my website as well, you know, if that's okay.
You do have it. You do have it. Actually, I wrote that letter in 2007, and I filed it in my county courthouse. So this year, I also wrote a letter to the local law enforcement agencies. I wrote it to the police department in Mount Pleasant and Columbia. I wrote that letter to the city managers for those two cities, to the sheriff, the county sheriff, and also to the county mayor. So that was 10 years ago. This year, I wrote a follow-up letter and said 10 years have passed. These things are continuing to happen. My health is in more distress than 10 years ago, obviously. And I ask again, will you review this letter and will you answer these questions? Is due process still a law? Is the Constitution still in action? Has slavery been reenacted and we not know about it?
You know what, actually, you know, I apologize. I apologize that I haven't picked up on this letter, but that's because Millicent has the most comprehensive documentation.
Oh,
really.
Yes, and many of her letters are as powerful.
Work through. So, you know, it's absolutely amazing. And every single item of that is a total bombshell. So I'm honestly, I'm very, very sorry that I, you know, ask you again for a document you already sent me, because, but I want to put that up online because people need to see this. And then the next step will be, because now we're so beyond having to prove that these crimes exist. You know, we're so beyond having to prove that chips in bodies exist because we found tons of them, you know, everywhere around the world. Now we are turning around, the herd is turning, and now we're going after the people who kept silent, you know, and who have been covering this up. So now I just want to have—
And who is still doing it. Still covering up. I mean, look at the silence around us, you know, in mainstream media, alternative media. Look at how people are refusing to respond.
Absolutely.
But, you know, that's coming to an end. You know, you and I and the rest of us and everybody else who's watching, who's of the same mind, at this particular point in time, to bring them down, to absolutely bring them down, and to force this out into the open, to force this issue out into the open.
Absolutely. And
we're not going to stop.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was just reading. I was just saying, we're not going to stop.
I think they sometimes amuse themselves with, you know, tweaking the audio delay between Europe and the US to set up these things where we then pipe up simultaneously, and they find that funny. But anyway, I think one of the things that also occurred to me is that another thing that's also we should do, because there's absolutely no one who is immune against corruption, and that includes judges. So we will also go after the judges who did this, because we have already met a string of corrupt judges. For example, I mean, you know, I can back up everything that you said, because in my case, it was Judge Holgate of the High Court in London that throughout my case, despite the fact that I had experienced an assassination attempt, received death threats, and I was made to collapse in front of my husband after the first hearing by MI5. And he threw out my case, and his argumentation was that he didn't strike out a claim because there was no claim to start with, because none of my papers had the precise combination of words, particulars of claim. So that's how ridiculous it can get, right? So, you know, the way that Millicent's case was thrown out, we'll look at it very carefully, and will now begin to go after the judges. Because again, just like in the case of Jeffrey Taylor, you know, the judges too are involved with the kiddie fucking, right? And any sort of irregularity, again, is an indication of capture. And the question is always, how do the intelligence agencies bribe or blackmail these people to behave irregularly, behave corruptly for them in a concerted manner? And, you know, whoever doesn't believe that this can be this case, please look at the case of the death of Justice Scalia, who I think was found dead at a kiddie fucking ranch, right? They were, the images I've seen of the ranch had like devil's heads around the rooms. There were little beds in front of every door set up in series. So children, it looks like, were being gravely mistreated. And not just that, I've also read reports that the owner of the ranch was also involved with some shady dealings in Latin America or something like that. I have to look it up because I didn't investigate, you know, the Scalia case, thank goodness, I would like to say, because I think that's a can of worms. But to the highest level, the judges too are involved in this. And there's a reason, because in the, well, if you approach the system with the neutral mindset, you would think that the best people got promoted to the top, and therefore the likelihood of finding a pedophile and a brutal serial killer at the top of the judiciary would be, you know, very unlikely. But this is not how the system works, because the system has been in deep capture for centuries, and the crime cartel that runs it has been promoting up criminals on purpose so that they can control them. So the top of the judiciary is the place where you're most likely to find serial killers and pedophiles. Anything that can actually create a control file will promote these people up. And now the question is only, it's not, are there any pedophiles at the top of the judiciary? No, the question is how many there are. You know, that's the only question. So no one should be surprised if a, you know, Supreme Court judge of the US and elsewhere is accused of shady things. You have to expect it. The probability for that is extremely high. So it's not just an option for us to go after the judges. We have to go after the judges, because you know, in many areas, in these areas, but also in the family courts, where they have been instrumental in removing children from their parents. For example, in the UK, the family courts are famous for their arbitrary decision-making.
Oh, the same here.
Yeah, exactly. They're even, you know, the Supreme Court judges of the UK sometimes go around and give speeches, which is brilliant because they actually do have a voice and they can really help us change this for the better. And one of them is on record, you know, stating publicly that the family courts are rather, you know, a field on themselves. I mean, they put it very politely, but what it means, it is randomness to facilitate the kiddie fucking architecture, which is horrific, but it's there for everybody to see. You know, and we have to go after the judges. So in my case, you know, Judge Colgate has got something coming and I'll take care of that. And in Millicent's case, we'll go after the judges because what they have essentially been doing is aiding, abetting crimes against humanity.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, and that, as you pointed out, Millicent, in your case, it's like there's the police, there's the court system, the judges, and then you have certain staff, not everybody, but certain staff in the hospitals as well. You know, not every doctor, because you've encountered some good doctors, right, Millicent? But a nurse who came after, for instance, on that particular occasion, the doctor talks to you and says, I don't see why you're here, you need to go home. And then a nurse, supposedly from crisis intervention, comes along and has a chat with you and writes down that you're delusional. Record in your file, and this nurse, by the way, Catherine, comes back to the court system. This nurse is married to a judge.
Bingo. There we go.
You see.
Now let's just guess what sort of investigation we shall be running on that judge, right?
No. They're not all bad. They are not all bad. In fact, that particular judge, after I wrote him a letter, I could not get my lawyer to, one, ask the judge to recuse himself, and two, I couldn't get him to introduce certain evidence into the court system. They, in this county, y'all, and the federal court told me that this county is the worst county in the state. She said nobody likes to hold court in Murray County because they do things their own way. But this particular judge, I wrote him and sent him my documents that proved that I knew what I was talking about and that I was innocent. And he told me, had his secretary tell me that they had to get permission from my lawyer for the judge to open the envelope because it was against the law. But I couldn't get my lawyer to introduce him into the court. So then my lawyer quit. He quit. But the judge said, I will prepare the dismissal paperwork myself if I have to. I told him that I had work waiting for me, that I was being held up from leaving. He gave me permission to leave. He said, when you get settled, he told the clerk to give me the expungement paperwork. He said, when you get settled, send me this paperwork filled out with your address. I will sign it and we'll send it back to you. So that got me cleared with the university, with the seminary. I could have not gotten into the seminary, and they were not going to let me stay if I had anything on a record, anything. They were the ones that contacted me and told me that it had been posted. It was not to have been posted because I was supposed to have been innocent to proven guilty, but it was already posted on a federal crime report.
Wow.
So yes, and the seminary notified me that they had seen it. I didn't know it was there, but they said, what is this? You've got to get it cleared up. They were going to put me out. So I did. The judge did sign it, and he expunged the crime report, and asked me to pray for him. He said, and please do pray for me. So they're not all bad. The police, from the police department, it was Police Sergeant Burgett who suggested that I have the sleep study.
I agree, Millicent. I didn't mean to imply that, because also in my case, for example, Judge Spencer, the first one, he was genuinely shocked, right? I mean, I could tell, it's absolutely, no, I'm not saying they are all bad, but the judge who helped you was not the husband of the nurse, was he?
He was.
Oh, what, really?
That was the husband of the nurse?
Well, I think I'm marrying each other in your state. I didn't understand that. So sorry, the nurse marks you as mentally ill, and her husband helps you to have your lawyer dismissed.
A year later, right?
A year later.
Her husband, yeah, her husband actually says he would prepare the dismissal paperwork himself if he had to. And
okay,
he did indeed.
but then again, he was preparing the dismissal paperwork for your lawyer, leaving you to represent yourself. I mean, he's pretty glad to help you with that, you know, stand there totally on his own. I mean, I want to hear from him saying like, oh, I'm going to help you with your case if you represent yourself, even if I have to do the legal investigation myself. That would be something I would be like, okay, thumbs up. It's like, oh, you know, your lawyer's being dismissed. Let me just help you to expedite the paperwork,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, let me tell you again that Murray County is 1/10 the size of Memphis, Tennessee. And yet Murray County in 2013 had more domestic violence cases than any city in the state. And the domestic violence agency's lawyer, well, she actually was the director of our domestic violence center, but she was also an attorney. She was quoted in the newspaper by saying the reason that there are so many domestic violence cases in the court system is because of the court system, because the police investigators, the police department, and because of the prosecutor. They really do turn a deaf ear on the cries of the women in this town and in this county. I told you all before about an ex-police officer who was also ex-Army that stalked and murdered a medical doctor.
Yeah.
And he killed himself. In 2012, there was a man who killed his wife, her 2 daughters, and himself. So, and all of these people are crying out, begging for help. They're begging for protection, and we get none. Listen, the National Network to End Domestic Violence Safety Net team told me to tell our local police department, both in Columbia and in Mount Pleasant, that they would teach them, they would train them in how to solve a cybercrime. Neither one of them. And I'm just talking about computer hacking, cell phone hacking, that kind of thing. They don't even want to know how to solve the easy crime.
And that's the people who didn't want to know was that Chief Potts, so I talked to his predecessor.
That was, well, no, Chief Potts, because that was last year. Last year, I sent him the email from the National Network to End Domestic Violence, their safety net team. I sent him the email and says, these people say they will help you. They will educate you.
Right.
They get federal funds to educate police departments in solving cybercrimes in domestic violence cases.
Yeah, both Karen and I talked to Chief Potts, and none of us were impressed. Like, not impressed is the British polite way of putting it, you know?
Yes, I did report on the fact that you spoke to him, and he actually said that Millicent hadn't provided any evidence, which is laughable.
It was not just a lie, it was the moronic lie, because I was CC'd in on an email where she sent evidence the day before, you know, to him.
And we've all seen the piles of her evidence, you know.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, and I've recorded quite a bit of it in the article, but literally, Millicent has proved that her body is filled up with implants. You know, she's had radio scans done, and she's had toxicology analyses done. And her body is filled up with nanobiosensors that are emitting and receiving radio frequencies that can be traced via their specific waveguide signals to specific kinds of nanobiotech that are being specifically researched by specific universities. So, and that are coming from specific army bases. So there's a real there's a trail there. There's an absolute trail there, you know. And so all of this is proof, all of this is evidence. And apart from that, there's other things. There's x-rays where they found a transponder in her, what looks like a transponder in her upper jaw. There are, there's a nuclear magnetic resonance scan of her heart, which shows an artifact embedded in the basal wall of her heart.
You know what?
She had a scar. She wakes up one morning, has a scar on her chest, and she has this guy's voice in her head saying, "I want you to lie down on your right side for 8 hours. You've just had cardiac surgery."
Just imagine living through that horror, right?
Incredible, yeah.
Let me remind you all, this is the ear. This is the static maker that is to combat the Morse code that was found in my ear, going to my brain 3 weeks ago. I've been wearing this almost 24 hours a day to try and break up the Morse code that is being used to send radio frequencies to my brain that would allow someone to speak directly to my brain day and night.
You know what? And also I want everybody to understand, I want people who are watching this to understand two things. So number one, everything that Millicent says, all of us can back up. For example, when I went to attend the court hearing of Dr. Stephen Frost in the UK, in Manchester, MI5 amused themselves with remote controlling my heart. I was sitting in the court hearing, and 1 hour into a court hearing, my heart didn't just start racing. It was step by step ramped up, then it was switched off, and then exactly 15 minutes later, they did the same thing again. And you're sitting there and someone races your heart to the point as if you were running a race and then switches it off, right? So I have got one of these pacemakers in my heart as well. And these degenerates then amuse themselves with that sort of stuff, right? And once you have a remote control chip in your body, like Millicent has, like I have, like other people suspect they have, they can be controlled from anywhere. So then they are shipped out to universities who do so-called the research, but I tell you, it's not research. It's bullshit. It's just bullshit. And actually what it is also, sorry?
Call it, you know, that needs to be appropriately established. It's torture.
It is torture.
It is torture.
And it's you know, it's more than that. It is human trafficking, because I think this,
and it's non-consensual.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's non-consensual. It's non-consensual human experimentation, and it's torture.
Yeah, you know what? And that's exactly it, because certainly it's none of it is non-consensual. But I balk at calling it even human experimentation, because it puts a scientific gloss on. You know, the sex ratio doesn't agree with experimentation. You would want to have men, women equal, and instead we've got 70 to 80% women. And what they're doing, it tallies more with the sexual arousal of psychopaths. You know, so it's human trafficking. And, you know, I know Paul's getting impatient because I think we're overrunning, but I just want people to
go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Catherine.
The last sentence I want people to understand is that Millicent has been put through the SEER torture training, and at the same time she did a master thesis and the PhD. She is not just a Navy SEAL. She's an uber Navy SEAL, because I never met a Navy SEAL capable of writing a PhD while being tortured, right? So Millicent is something extraordinary here. And people have to understand that, because the pain that you feel when you have these chips in your body and the insanity that they do with you, I mean, you cannot understand it unless you've been tortured yourself.
Yes, and I think we should stress really that, you know, universities are doing this research, as you said, Catherine, but they're essentially engaging and condoning torture.
Yeah,
exactly. And you have to remember, this all reports up to a sex cult. I mean, if you look at the Freemasons, they all wear aprons. You've seen them. That apron is to protect the holiest of holies. So it all goes back to sex. It all goes back to trafficking, and that's where it goes. We're going to have to bring it to a close. We could do this again next time. There's so much information on Millicent.
Yes.
Paul, can I add one thing?
Sure, you can.
Since you brought up the Holy of Holies, the space of a woman's body below the waist is of extreme interest to the torturers. That's why I receive the most torture constantly. I was sitting in a courtroom. In fact, it was the day that I was having the hearing for the order of protection. I was being sexually manipulated 2/3 of the time that I was sitting in that courtroom. All of a sudden, this person got up and walked out of the courtroom, and that manipulation stopped. The next year that I was in the courtroom having the hearing for the filing false reports, I was so assaulted sexually that I could not stay there any longer. I was allowed to leave, I went to the walk-in clinic. They established that my blood pressure was raised. I went and had a biofeedback scan that established that my reproductive organs were inflamed. And the next day I went to my medical doctor who did a rape test, and she established that I had been sexually assaulted. She documented that I had been raped.
You know, again, Millicent, I second everything you said, because I think it was my second hearing in front of Judge Edith, when there were, I think, 3 people in the room. It was Mr. Green, Miss Aaron, the 2 barristers for, you know, the respondents, and there was this, you know, nondescript, grumpy old guy, you know, trying to intimidate the judge. But when I stood up and I was talking to Judge Edith, what they did with me is that they muscle pulsed my inner thighs. So, you know, all of you know the muscle pulsing. You know, I'm not sure if it's done through the chips that they put into everywhere, you know, or if it's actually, you know, little electromagnetic pulses fired into me. But again, inner thighs, you know, it's this sexual humiliation in front of a judge. They literally, we have, and that is MI5 in the UK doing identical stuff to these nut jobs in the US, you know. So Paul is right, it all connects to a sex cult. And there are also whistleblower articles, you know, I can maybe link that, where they tie in the heads of MI6 and MI5, the current ones alive, and they say they are members of a sex cult. Yeah, these people, and that's why I call, you know, it's not military intelligence sections 5 and 6, it's military intercourse sections 5 and 6, you know, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, intelligence is absolutely the wrong word to use for them. I mean, they've got the guts and the gall to use that word. They don't have any intelligence whatsoever. They're engaged in the most dastardly covert ops against humanity, against all of us.
Well, let me say that kind of sexual assaulting did not occur during the first 5 years of being targeted. It was after that person retired that the sexual stuff began. And it was indeed often in public places where there were rooms full of men.
Wow.
Well,
Absolutely.
we're going to have to bring it to a close. We can go around and say goodbye. I think why don't we start off with just little quick statements, and then we can go for this week. Millicent, would you like to start?
Well, my statement, I've been looking for my for that document that I sent, because I did have it scanned after I got it finished and mailed to the police departments, and I do have my certified mail numbers on the document, so you all can also be able to track that they were received. But I'm going to send it to you, Mindy, so that you can attach it to the broadcast today. And so I was looking for it and I didn't find it, but I will send it as soon as we're finished.
Thank you very much, Millicent. Karen?
Well, I did look a little bit at Millicent's article. I read some of it, you know, kind of scanned through it, and I would tell people to take the time and read it carefully, because it's a very important document. It is, of course, well done, and it will show you that these things are not only from people in high powers, but this can be this technology can be gotten by the local psychopath, and who can wreak havoc with an entire town, not just a particular person, but they can hone in on one person and physically destroy that person remotely. So this is a very, very important document to sit down carefully and read, and then come back and read it again. And I thank you, Millicent and Ramola, for a brilliant job. It helps everyone, and we hope that it helps Millicent specifically and quickly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. Catherine, did you want to say something before I do, or?
You have to have the last word on this, Ramola. I just wanted to thank you for this, you know, absolutely amazing and frankly, you know, investigative journalist prize-winning piece of work that will be generation defining, because it breaks again, you know, the biggest the biggest taboo, right? And again, the biggest taboo is the abuse of women, women whistleblowers, and also women of foreign heritage, you know, all of us fall into that category one way or another. And again, it comes back, and Millicent is absolutely right. This is modern day slavery. And I just ask that we just continue this next week, because every single topic we can talk about, universities, medics, psychiatry, and the police, ties in with Millicent's case. It is absolutely just breathtaking. And one of the things I wanted to say to Millicent particularly is that I'm just so honored to have her on the joint investigation team, because she is the most extraordinary woman and the most extraordinary Navy SEAL that ever existed in the history of the USA. Really, thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I second that absolutely, Millicent. I mean, Millicent is exceptional in every way. And, you know, the topics that you mentioned, Catherine, are precisely what we should focus on the next time. Electronic slavery, which I've thrown into the title, which I think is so central to Millicent's case. And it comes from something that Mr. Wolf said to her. He literally turned to her in a car while she was sitting in the car with him and said, just that, without any preface, electronic slavery. So, you know, we need to talk about that, and about radio hypnosis, which he's using on her and using on the entire town, and radio broadcasting, how radio stations are being used and how radio frequencies are being used to hypnotize a town, and how the CIA's MK Ultra plays into the scenario, and also the CIA's Manchurian candidacy plays into the scenario, because that's what's being leveled against Millicent here as well. So there's really depths and depths that we can go into, and you know, hopefully we'll do that. I'm going to try to clean up the article meanwhile, and it's posted, but I would like to add a few more graphics and set up a few more links. So I'll do that between now and next week, and so hopefully the next few days you'll see the article sort of getting padded a little bit.
Okay, if we link up to it, Ramola, will our link incorporate the changes? I think it will.
Oh, sure. If you sign up for my RSS feed, or, you know, subscribe to my email on my site, you'll get a notification as soon as the article's updated too. Yeah.
But
okay, and so
I'll wait to post it on I can easily send it to you when it's fully done too. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
The URL shouldn't change. I mean, unless you change the title of the URL. I think it's, you know, a link will be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it'll be on Catherine's website, I know. It'll be on Ramola's website. It'll be on our website, pinecone-utopia@wordpress.com. And probably, if Millicent has one, and she does, I know she does. And Karen, you can put it up too if you'd like. And with that, I'll sign off for another amazing Techno-Crime Stoppers Forums. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you very much for everybody in the chat and everybody that's watching this. Thank you very much.